Hello and welcome to this training for trainers on creation control process focused art. This is a 2-hour training and let's get started. To begin, you will need to have all the documents for this training, which is the presentation itself, the instruction plan, as well as the 3 different handouts. The 3 different handouts are, to begin with, handout number 1. It is the section of the art section for editors and eckers of the note cards, just the art section. You could also include the family childcare if you are doing this for family childcare providers specifically, or if there will be in attendance. The second handout is your notes page as well as the transfer of learning. So on this one, there are some spots where the participants can be taking notes, but they can also use it to plan what they're going to do next. This is for an activity. And this is also part of the notes at the end. This is a story that you will be reading in one of the activities, part of the training, but it is also provided for the teachers just to share with other staff or to read it along with you. This is handout number 3, provided at the end of the training as a summary for everything we just covered. And this is the application. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The training begins with the same format that we do for every other training. Remind participants of the documents that were emailed to them to sign in using their Georgia PDS number. Keep in mind attendance and late arrivals. Zoom etiquette guidelines, remind them to mute themselves if they're not speaking, as well as keeping their camera, being mindful of their camera since we can see everything if they decide to have their camera on. Yes, here's the list of the materials and handouts you will be using for this training. Next, you will review the objectives and also remind them of the expectations to participate and the handouts that were emailed again. And we go on to the first activity. This activity is trying to get their understanding of what do they feel that a process-focused art is, and also what a product-focused art is. So you will have an activity with them. You will have this from a presenters mode, and you will do one image at a time and asking them to unmute themselves or put it in the chat box and yell out or type in whether this is a process-focused art or it's a product-focused art. And for this picture right here, half of the picture that you already see was drawn by the teacher. The children are expected to do the same on the other side and replicate it. So just remind them of the purpose of this activity here. It's the same for the next slide. And on the next activity, you are going to read the story, The Little Boy by Helen E. Buckley. And after reading the story, there are some questions to ask and talk with the participants. Here are some of the questions that you can present to the participants and have them answer, and just talk about this story and how the child experiences one type of art, and then at the end, the child is just basically accustomed to that type where his imagination gets shut down. Read the story before you have this training. Read the story before you present it to somebody else. Get familiar with the story. The next activity is a video. The link is right here, but it's also embedded in the presentation. I'm going to watch the video and ask participants to take notes on what they see, hear, and notice. And then here are the talking points after the video. The next activity is called waterfall discussion, where you're going to ask participants a set of questions one at a time, and you're going to ask them to create a waterfall of all the answers in the chat box. So you're going to read the question, have participants type the answer, and then at the same time, everyone press enter and submits their chat box reply. You can do a practice question on this, such as what city were you born, or maybe ask them about what's their favorite song, or their favorite book, or what they had for dinner last night, to just practice that waterfall effect. But here is how the presentation starts with one question. They will answer it, reply it, and go over the answers and read a couple of them out loud. And also the next one, read a couple of them out loud, and so on. But pose one question at a time. How can this be done by teachers? Read a couple of those answers. And then why do you think some teachers have a hard time choosing process-oriented art experiences over those focused on product? And have a couple of answers ready in case you have quiet participants. And that leads on to the importance of creativity. This is a short, just a lecture. And ask participants to come up with an idea for extending some of those projects. And you can talk about it, an extension of some of the projects discussed during the little lecture. Just for example, the famous handprints. How can you extend that? You can extend it by, okay, go ahead and do your handprints on this paper and provide the children with a white piece of paper to get the rest of the paint off from their hands and just create whatever they want. They're already dirty anyway. They already have paint on their fingers anyway. And so why not just continue finger painting, free expressive finger painting? That's an example of extending that handprint activity. Then you will ask them again about if they have any additional reasons why creativity is important, not just for right now, but also in their future. And here are some that you can share with them. Now that we have told them basically why creativity is important, as well as show them examples of what the process-based art is and what a product-focused art is. Now, how can they do that, basically? So you're going to explain to them that you emailed these resources already. Again, you can also add the family childcare providers a note card in there and ask them to use them as a guide for this small group activity. So in this small group activity, there are going to be 4 different groups. Even if you have to just have 2 people per group, it is recommended that 4 groups happen. And in each group, it's going to be assigned according to the following categories. Group number 1 is going to take note on access to materials. So they're going to basically make a list of what type of materials they need. Group number 2 is going to take safety into account. In the arts section, what do we need to be aware of? What kind of safety do we need to be aware of? And group number 3, space and furnishing. So how is this center supposed to be set up? What do we need in space and furnishing? And group number 4, interactions from staff, the staff expectations. So each group is going to get about, I don't know, 7 minutes divided, so they can present as well, depending on how many groups you end up having. If you do need to do less groups, probably take one of them out, but just make sure that you share that information with the participants when you guys come back. So let's say that, for example, you choose to omit group number 2 and then just have group 1, 3, and 4. And when they're presenting, group 1 presents their materials. And if they don't have the right answers, or if you want to guide them again to the scale, remind them that there is a page number to look at. And you can use the next slides when you are going over those items, but it's your choice. Then each group will present, and if they don't share what you're looking for, here are some reminders to remind them of choking. There are some items that can be considered choking hazard as well as food. For space and furnishing, if they forget to mention tables and chairs, talk about that. Is the easel set up and ready to use? And is it inviting, or is it just there leaning against the wall? So here are some reminders as well. Once they all present, share again, remind them of this tool and explain to them how this section is used. You know, here you can see that there's a safety already, a note, no edible materials. There's a list of recommended art materials. It doesn't mean that you have to have all of these materials in there, but there are some recommendations right here, as well as interactions and staff expectations in tier 2 words, and the same for the preschool section, where they have more requirements of materials, but the interactions and staff expectations, as well as the tier 2 words, are here as a guide. And your running time at this point is about an hour, a little bit over an hour. And check for understanding. This time will give you a chance to just catch up if you went overtime in some of your activities. So at this point is 65 minutes. Now, what is learned in the art center? So now that they understand the difference between process-focused art and product-focused art, and they know that creativity is important, and they know what they need in the art center and what the expectations are. It's going deeper onto understanding what exactly is learned during the art center activities and experiences. So here is a mini lecture and some points to share. You can ask participants to give you examples in their daily life where creativity is important. You have a group of teachers, so that's going to be fun to hear from, because they all should be using some kind of imagination and creativity, but also take it back to their daily life at home. How do they decide what to cook, decorate their home? They have their aesthetic on how they like things to look, and some of those things they have to make and create themselves. So creativity is probably in their hobbies and some other areas in their life that is different from teaching. Addition to that, we're going to break it down into different parts of the intellectual on what is learned, the social emotional development. This is what's learned in social emotional development. So these next 3 slides are mainly mini lectures, and you can ask participants as well to give you some ideas. Intellectual development is here, as well as some points right there. Ask questions. You can see right here. While working alongside children, teachers can model research and thinking skills by breaking down a problem into manageable parts, wondering what if testing and evaluating ideas. So during that experience, consider asking these following questions. So just share it with them, but also, just don't make it too boring, because this is probably the boring part of the training, just sharing facts, and the physical development. Next, we move to a more engaging activity where they are going back to smaller groups, depending again on how big your group is. If you have 10 participants, then you could possibly do it into 2 different groups, but it really depends on how many participants you have. So this activity is basically that alteration of that old school mentality of art, where you are going to show this slide and ask them to choose an activity or assign them one of those activities, and ask them to reinvent it, to come up with ways to make it more child created rather than just product focused. As you can see in these examples, this product is supposed to be a pumpkin, and that it's a handprint, and it's so neat. This set of fall activities had a purpose on how they were ending, so they all ended up looking the same. Same with the picture right here of the collage of the flower. Everything was teacher guided. So the groups will choose a spokesperson to share at least one of the ideas, as well as how they modified that specific activity. So you will share this slide, that way they can see the pictures better. But if they have another activity in mind, then I would recommend them sharing a picture of it, or at least, and so we'll have an idea of what it is that they are altering. So the next, after they share, then we go on to the next section of this, which is what to observe during art experiences. And this is the last section. Here's a short list of the items that you're going to be sharing on what to observe when children are experiencing or when they're using the art materials in the art center. So talk a little bit about how noticing these things can help the teacher update the area or add different materials that is going to individualize the activities for certain children. And of course, the talking points are at the bottom. The next one is small groups again. And you're going to have 4 different small groups. And here is talking about the interactions in those specific groups. And you're going to ask the teachers or the participants to come up with 3 conversation starters and or open-ended questions for each category. And then remind them that this is page 2 of their handouts, and to choose a participant to share it with the rest of the group. Next is the conclusion. Ask them to use page 1 of their handout and complete it, and remind them of handout number 3, which is the summary of this whole training. And they can also share it with their staff, with co-teachers, parents, and other educators. And then, of course, at the end, you're going to review the objectives again and share the training evaluation. And the resources used for this training are right here. So that's it. If you have any questions, please let us know.